Everyone, and welcome to our special council meeting on February 9th, 2026, starting at 5:30 p.m. I'd look for a mover and a seconder to start our meeting. Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Cressman. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. I'd call on Councillor Sadhu for our territorial land acknowledgement.
We have gathered in Wilmot Township on the traditional territory of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Mississauga peoples. We also want to acknowledge the importance of the Dish with One Spoon Covenant, a peace agreement made between the Indigenous nations before the Europeans arrived. It characterizes our collective responsibility to each other and Mother Earth. We should take only what we need, leave enough for others, and keep the dish clean. By acknowledging this covenant in the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people, we are reminded of our important connection to this land where we live, learn, and work together as a community.
Thank you. We do have a few additions to the agenda. I will also note that there was another delegate who registered this evening and is in person, and that's John Jordan, and he'll be called at the appropriate time. I'd be looking for a mover and a seconder for the adoption of the agenda as amended. Moved by Councillor Cressman, seconded by Councillor Sadhu. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interests? Oh, my apologies. Just let the record show it was not unanimous. My apologies. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Okay, seeing none. As I noted, we do have two delegations this evening. First, we do have correspondence, and I believe Councillor Dunstall wanted to pull the correspondence. You can speak on that, Councillor.
I apologize for that. I'd like to pull 7.1, the letter from Rory Farnham. Does that need to be seconded?
No, you're welcome to speak to it.
Great. I've been receiving quite a few calls from my constituents, quite a few from some of our farming community. And so I'd like to put this motion on the floor that the Council of Township of Wilmot formally express concern with the recommendation contained in Regional Report EESWIM 26003 to rescind the 1980 policy on water taking Wilmot Township, and that Council acknowledge that decisions regarding municipal water supply fall within the authority of the Region of Waterloo, and that Council emphasize that Wilmot Township residents, including members of the agricultural community who rely on groundwater and farm operations, have raised significant concerns regarding the determination and transfer of surplus water, and the Council requests that prior to any final decision by the Region of Waterloo, clear and publicly available information to be provided to Wilmot Council demonstrating how surplus water is defined, how local water levels will be protected, and how agricultural water users will be safeguarded both now and in the future. And that this resolution be forwarded to the regional chair, members of regional council, and senior regional staff for consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So just to catch everyone up if you're following online, so there was a correspondence item that Council received on the water. Councillor Dunstall is asking to bring forward this motion in relation to that correspondence. So that would technically require 2/3 for waiving notice of motion to allow it to be brought forward tonight. And the reason for timing urgency is because tomorrow there is a regional council meeting in relation to this water. So first we would just need to vote on being able to waive notice. Then if that's passed, then we'd have a seconder and we can talk about the motion. And there is a delegate who would like to speak to the motion as well. So first I'd be looking for, it's moved by Councillor Dunstall to waive notice, seconded by Councillor Wilkinson. Any comments or questions on that? All those in favor? That carries unanimously. So I'd now be looking for a seconder to Councillor Dunstall's motion, seconded by Councillor Martin. I will call on our delegate first, and then we'll open it up for council discussion. So John Jordan, if you would like to come and speak. This is on the water topic. If you do have comments, it's okay if you don't have anything to add though.
There's no button to turn on here, is there? Council, Ms. Mayor, thank you for allowing me to speak for a few moments. I did delegate it at Regional Council 2 weeks ago, I guess it is coming up now, in regard to our request to stop the 770 acres because of mainly now our water crisis, and that there have been no public consultations on this whatsoever, and there are a lot of farmers that are getting very concerned about their wells. Me being one of them, me being right across the road from the 770. And we know of numerous people in the area that their wells are running dry. Like they're running their dishwasher, they're running the wash machine, and all of a sudden they haven't got enough to get a glass of water. And I know the people that just bought Bob Zeller's place on Wilmot Center Road across from our place, they haven't got enough water in their well. So it's a concern. It is a grave, grave concern. It's kind of bewildering to us that, you know, and the region's doing what they can. I commend them on that. But making more water come out of the ground faster isn't going to help the water situation. As Andy Wilson said in his delegation, if you have a glass of water with 3 straws, putting another straw into the glass of water isn't going to fill the cup up any faster. And sucking on the straws harder isn't going to fill up the glass any faster. So we really urge council, and thank you for Councillor Dunstall for your motion this evening, that we need to protect our water, and the citizens are gravely, gravely concerned about this. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Were
you.
there any questions of clarification for the delegate? Okay, seeing none.
Okay.
Thank you again, John.
Thank you.
Any questions or comments on the motion before us, Council? Councillor Cressman?
So, through you, Mayor, and I guess to you, Mayor, because you will be involved with the discussion at the committee level tomorrow, I think part of this speaks to it, but we have to be very clear. There is monitoring wells, and there's numerous monitoring wells put by the region around the various wells, especially in the Mannheim area. We see the blue. Those of you that are familiar with them, they are blue and in the ditches along the side of the road, and they then determine the levels of the water. I don't know how frequently they are measured. Some, there's automatic measuring devices on them. I know there's one in Bethel Road that has a solar panel on it, and so that speaks to me about being an automatic device. So I think this will provide benchmarking of what were the levels previous to extra water being pumped, if that's their decision, and can address what is the level subsequent to that water being pumped. And I know when there was concerns in the Mannheim and Rosebank area when the last well went on, I think it's K24, but I could be wrong, on Mannheim Side Road in 1976, prior to the agreement. The region used to come around to landowners, measure their wells on a monthly basis, and leave a record of that for the landowners to ensure that they had adequate water. I know if my father was running the farm at that time, and one of the employees, when they had to start hauling water for our livestock because the well went dry, told my dad he had too much livestock because they had to haul too much water over time. And that wasn't the right thing to say to my father, because he said, you stole my water from a 6-foot well, and then I made it 16 feet, and you stole it from there. You dried my creek up, and you dried 25 acres of my swamp up, and now you're telling me I'm to blame. So anyhow, that's a totally separate story. So I think the point is, this is a concern of residents. We have to be aware of that, but as well, they're a partner in supplying water to our residents in the township. And if you're relying on turning on your tap in urban settings to water, who supplies it? The region is the source of the water pumped out of below us, and our township distributes it. So it's I wouldn't say a love-hate relationship, but it is a complicated relationship, and so we have to understand we gain benefits from a water system that we can trust, but also we have to be aware of where it's impacting. So I think I see this approach as a bit of a balance. I see leaving the agreement or MOU in place and looking at a temporary suspension or amending. I don't know what the word is that is better captures it, but temporarily suspend it, allow the activities in the urban centers to continue. I'd rather, you know, it is important that we address the housing needs of the region, and if this will help alleviate some of that temporarily and allow building to continue to some extent until more permanent solutions are found, and then we can go back to the original levels of pumping from the township. So I see this as a compromise, not a perfect compromise, but I see it as a path forward.
Thank you. Just to clarify, because at the very start you said you'd pose it as a question to me, did you want me to respond to you? Because you essentially just summarized both this motion and the motion I plan on bringing forward tomorrow at Regional Council. So just curious there. If you want. Oh.
I guess what I was saying is temporary suspend is my wording. I think there might be a more appropriate word that I understand Director Martin had put forward. It somehow didn't lodge in my brain. So if there's a more appropriate word for your discussion tomorrow, I will give you the ability to use whatever is more appropriate.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, through the chair. I appreciate Councillor Dunstall bringing forward this motion, and I think it's definitely headed in the right direction. I support it, and I even had some of my own notes when I was thinking about this topic over the weekend, and I'm wondering if it's potentially we could even look at incorporating some enhancements to it. And I mean, certainly providing safeguards and providing the calculations, but I think, you know, I want to go a step further and say that we should maybe expand and ask for the region to do specific things, such as, you know, operating limits, and defining what the annual monthly pumping limits could be, set a baseline, and then it also will help us inform the monitoring, right? So we could look at what's the drawdown, if you reach certain thresholds. I mean, at what point do you start reducing what you're pulling out of the ground? And I think that ties in with the transparency that would be required as well, but we really should. I mean, you read back on these agreements that we had in the early 80s, we were supposed to be getting I think a quarterly update, or a monthly update, excuse me, as a council. So, you know, we're certainly not seeing those, or they've been hidden somewhere. So I think looking at saying, publish the monitoring results so that the public can have faith that their wells are not being affected, and I know this certainly affects Ward 1 quite a bit, right? And everybody east of the, well, essentially Sandhills right now, where this would be a huge effect. And then I would even ask for them to maybe include like a private well protection piece as well. So saying that if, you know, they have an intake, then there's an investigation, and then a mitigation process. So sort of looking at, if something happens, at what point does the region potentially pay for and replace a well that's been affected specifically by this? So I think there's some pieces in there we can maybe ask them to strengthen. And I agree that it's just not suspending, or well, not rescinding the agreement, but rather like temporary suspension as language, but really at the end of the day, once things have been sorted out, this agreement should go back into effect and be respected. So putting in some sort of annual review or sunset clause just to make sure that we are achieving that. I can certainly share some of these points with the clerk. I don't know if anybody would be interested in adopting some of these changes, but I want to take it a step further and strengthen it and suggest that go ahead, we'll be the good neighbor, but our citizens deserve certain reassurances that things are going to be monitored, maintained, and if there's a problem, you're going to take care of them. That would be my ask. So I would put that out there, and if anybody wants to venture down an amendment to the motion, I certainly would welcome it.
Councillor Sadoo?
Thank you. I am in the same line of thinking as my fellow councillors, Cressman and Wilkinson, that if you are going to be taking more water, which is being asked, we do need the safeguards in place. We've always been a good regional partner, but ultimately our groundwater is not an unlimited resource. And you can't just keep taking more water faster without risking our aquifers and our residents' wells. So yes, being a good neighbor, but also understanding that we can't just keep pumping more water out without mitigating any of the risks. So having the key points in there for monitoring and having updated reports, I think is crucial. Just the wording right now doesn't sit well for me as far as just rescinding the 1980, not rescinding, sorry, the water supply understanding. So I am in favor of the line of thinking that Councillor Wilkinson was heading down of including those safeguards and getting that in writing.
Councillor Martin, did you want to chime in at all, just noting you're the only one who hasn't spoken to it yet?
Thank you, through you, Mayor Salonen. I guess I have a few thoughts, but one question I would have, so there's our discussion tonight, but then there's the regional meeting tomorrow night. You indicated, Mayor, that you're planning to put forward a motion. Are you at liberty to discuss what the nature of that motion is?
Yes, I just also don't want us to get too far down the rabbit hole of what is Wilmot business and what is not. So I guess first I'll say, in terms of Councillor Dunstall's motion, I think it's very well balanced, and it does acknowledge the fact that it is the region who ultimately gets to decide this. I think the other note that hasn't been very well advertised by the region is that groundwater is a provincial crown resource. So although yes, it is being good neighbor language that everyone's talking about and has an impact on our residents if they do draw more, keeping in mind at the end of the day it is the province who gets to decide how much water the region is allowed to take through a water take permit. So even if the region decides tomorrow to make changes, it's still, they won't be able to go over the limits of what the province dictates for them. And right now my understanding is that they have asked to increase their water take permits both in the Shingletown well and from the Grand River to help address the capacity issue. So just want to clarify that. In terms of tomorrow for the discussion around regional council, my intent was to bring forward an amendment that essentially would be asking, instead of rescinding, language that we temporarily suspend so that development and growth is able to currently continue, and suspend the current regional policy on water taking until 2027, when the region is expected to have before regional council the new water supply master plan. The reason for giving them that time, there's still a lot of questions to be answered, like the surplus question that Councillor Dunstall has identified in her motion, but also what growth looks like, speaking to what our delegate said this evening, what is actually being accounted for, because right now it says Wilmot's able to achieve their 2051 growth. I'm also curious what's beyond 2051, because I'm pretty confident the years don't suddenly stop. So I can appreciate at the same time that staff at the region don't currently have that information, and that's part of their water master plan strategy. So what I'm going to be asking for is that right now, temporarily suspend what the water taking policy is from 1980, and then regional council can reassess it when they have all of that additional information. And in the meantime, that does allow for growth, and from what I understand from regional staff is in the very, very immediate, it will not have a negative impact on anyone in the community. But it does also, if we rescind, I'd be asking to monitor neighboring wells and creeks to understand if when the draw starts being more, that we can note that there's a direct correlation, because one of the hardest things to prove in water take permits is once somebody starts pumping water, if somebody who's a neighbor sees an impact, it's one of the hardest things legally to prove in this province that it's because of that water take permit. So I want monitoring tied directly to that. Whether or not that stands tomorrow is up to regional council, but that is essentially along the lines of what I plan on bringing forward. And then if council passes this, of course, that will be brought forward of council, like Wilmot Council's wishes for the region to follow. So did you have a follow-up to that?
Yeah, so thank you, Mayor. I guess I was curious what your thoughts were of what you're planning to take forward, because this motion from Councillor Dunstall and then whatever you're taking forward, it seems to me need to match so that we have somewhat coherent a message that coincides, that we can have a stronger voice from the township. So thank you.
Yep. Councillor Dunstall, did you have anything else you wanted to add onto this?
No,
Okay.
just that I've received quite a few calls from some of our local farmers, and they're very concerned, but I already mentioned that, and it's already in the motion.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cressman.
Just through you, Mayor, to you, regarding the process, this is a committee meeting. When will the committee results go in front of regional council?
That's a great question. So yes, tomorrow is a committee meeting. One thing I will note, if it's like our last committee meeting about water, staff were directed to start actioning the committee decision before it was ratified by council. That was because some of the things we had asked for was for information to be provided by the end of January, and if staff hadn't started acting on it yet, there would have been a day's turnaround for them to get that information going. So noting that there could be peculiarities like that, if there aren't, it'll be coming for final ratification to regional council at our end of February meeting, which is the last Wednesday, so it would be Wednesday the 25th of February. Any additional comments, questions, or were there amendments that people wanted to proceed with? Councillor Wilkinson?
Through the chair, I would put forward an amendment to the, well, it's a motion, that we ask for operating limits and transparency on that, as well as private well protection. And then in addition to that, that we ask for a review process with clearly identified markers to ensure that we're revisiting this. Because I think ultimately, no matter what, we don't want this agreement to go away. And I understand the province, we really can't instruct the region what to do with this resource, and we can't control what the province will approve. But ultimately, we had an agreement. Yeah, it was 45 years ago, but we have an agreement, right? So I guess I could be clearer, but I would say that we ask that the region provide clear operating limits and thresholds, and publish drawdown pumping numbers, that they produce monitoring results provided on a public dashboard, as well that there be consideration taken for private well protection. So looking at investigation, mitigation, and essentially, I guess you'd have to tie it to, like, I don't know what the region would suggest. And then also do not rescind the historic policy, but ultimately temporarily suspend, and then review, we'll say, I don't know, in 365 days would be my suggestion. And I'm seeing the clerk has messaged me here. And further, okay, so let's go with the language here. Thank you, Amelia. And further that council, this would be the amendment to the motion, and further that council requests that the Region of Waterloo set water taking operating limits, including identifying monthly and annual limits to inform monitoring of systems, and that the region provide regular public reporting on water taking to enhance transparency, and that consideration be given to private well protection. And then the only other thing I would add is just that we are looking to not rescind this, but rather temporarily suspend the agreement. That's excellent wording. Thank you, clerk.
Okay. Oh, just one moment. Are you okay if the two items are separated, so the do not rescind being its own part? Okay. With that, is there a seconder for this amendment? Councillor Sadhu is seconding that. Any further comments or questions on the proposed, I guess, two amendments? Councillor Martin?
Thank you, through you, Mayor Salen. I'm curious, and I'm not sure who to ask. I'm wondering if any of our staff would be able to talk. I know Director Okrafka, with regards to planning, as well as Director Martin in development services. I don't know if you've had history there. I'm just curious what thoughts are in terms of the wording of this motion, how it speaks to our relationship with the region, as well as our relationship with the province, and what authority we actually have.
I mean, staff are welcome to speak to it. I guess the one thing I would just air is because it's not in the wheelhouse of our staff, I just don't want to put them in an awkward position of giving advice. But again, if you guys have thoughts you would like to include, you're more than welcome to. I am happy to also weigh in that there are other jurisdictions not on this matter, but there have been other municipalities in the region that have passed motions of recommendation or of asking things to regional council, so it's not unorthodox in that sense. And again, just as long as we all recognize we aren't necessarily guaranteed to get what's being asked, but to your point earlier is that having support of this council through a motion that Councillor Dunstall's brought forward does certainly help, I would say, with my colleagues around the regional table. So yeah, I would maybe say that, and I don't see any staff wanting to necessarily weigh in. Yeah. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Wilkinson?
Through the chair, could we just hear the second part? I guess, are we going to dispense with the First Amendment and then, okay.
Yes, I have you moving and seconding both, like you moving both amendments, Councillor Sadhu seconding both amendments, but we're going to vote on the first one, and then we will do the not rescinding one second, if that works for everyone. So any other comments or questions on the first set of additions? Okay, seeing none, I will call the vote on that amendment then. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. And now on to the second amendment, and that's the not rescinding, but just doing a temporary hold. We already have it moved and seconded. Any other comments or questions on that? Councillor Wilkinson?
Through the chair, just looking to hear the exact wording, if we could, please.
Through you, Mayor, to Council, that the main motion be amended to change rescind to suspend.
No, I'd maybe clarify that Wilmot Council asks Regional Council not to rescind the water, the 1980 policy on water taking, instead to temporarily suspend. Now, Councillor Wilkinson, I know you had said and revisit in 365 days. I would maybe just throw out noting 365 days would take them to probably budget time of the new term of council at the region. I would suggest maybe having it align with the 2027 water supply strategy coming back, because regional staff have already committed that that will be coming back, and that is historically what sets draw limits and stuff. Okay, so if you're fine with that. So I think clerks are fully verifying the wording, but essentially it would be, and that council request that regional council not rescind the 1980 policy on water taking, but instead temporarily suspend until 2027 when regional council has provided the new water supply master plan. That language works for everyone? Okay. Any other comments or questions on that? Seeing none, all those in favor? That carries unanimously. So now we have our motion as amended. Were there any other comments on the motion as amended? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that carries unanimously. If you are interested in tuning in tomorrow to Regional Committee on Water, that is a part of our last committee meeting of the day. It is currently scheduled to start at 2 p.m. Scheduling may slightly vary depending on how quickly we get through our earlier meetings in the day. Councillor Cressman.
Just a further question on that for those who are listening online and to those of us here. How do we, is it any different than tuning into a YouTube on regional council, or is it identified differently?
Great question. To my knowledge, granted, I've never tuned in that way myself personally, but to my understanding, it is on the regional YouTube is how it's streamed. I do know that our meetings are streamed through YouTube. I would imagine you can get it on the regional website in our calendar to click into the YouTube. Otherwise, you can directly connect through YouTube to get it. Not a problem. Okay, on to the remaining business for today, and that is additional amendments to the current proposed 2026 budget. Noting that the line-by-line budget and updated capital budget request forms as requested by council were appended to the agenda, and the most up-to-date versions are posted on the Township's budget website. I did also want to quickly turn over to Director Gurwal to update us on the debt capacity question that came up last week.
Thank you, through your mayor. Currently, the township has entered into various debt instruments to fund long-term capital projects. The total of that debt is about $15 million. Through 2026, the township will have repaid about $2.5 million, keeping in mind that the interest component of those payments is much higher in the earlier years than it would be in later stages. Now, looking at the debt repayments as a percentage of revenues, so in Ontario, annual debt service costs must not exceed 25% of, in simple terms, non-grant revenue. Currently, the township's annual debt service costs are at about 6.11%, with the $4.8 million debt instrument proposed in the 2026 budget, assuming a 10-year term. That percentage would increase to 9%, which keeps it below the 25% threshold. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions on that, Councillor Cressman?
Excellent. I appreciate that quick response because I think that's exactly trying to keep my comfort level. I was hearing 15% as a general level that other municipalities were talking about at Roma. And so I think I appreciate providing that information.
Great. I would also remind councillors and the public we're currently at 9.22%. That was based off of the two amendments made last week. And in terms of this evening, there is no additional presentation. So what I would suggest is that we will have our registered delegate come up and speak, and then after that, council can jump into any additional questions and then amendments. Also noting tonight is the final night in terms of the legislative timeline. That was all outlined on January 9th in the budget booklet. And to that point, council can make any amendments that they want so long as the budget remains balanced. So anything that you are looking to do, just ensure that if it's to decrease or increase services, that you have the understanding of the impact on the other end as well. So to that, like I said, we do have one registered delegate this evening. And I would like to remind our delegations of some guidelines for participation. Please proceed to the podium when you are called. If you conduct yourself in any of the following manners, it will result in immediate removal from the meeting. That includes interrupting councillors, staff, or other delegations, derogatory statements about councillors, staff, or others, and hate speech or defamatory comments. And one last reminder for delegations to please not take offense if following the presentation there are no questions from council, as this is council's time to listen and reflect upon the opinions and ideas shared from our community members. With that, I will invite up Mr. Barry Wolf, and Mr. Wolf, you will have 7 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor. Council, good evening. Point of order first on the agenda tonight. There's an attachment to my delegation that is not the script of my delegation. It was a private internal communication with a closed loop addressed to the mayor, and I don't know how a private communication on a closed loop became a public document, but it was designed to shake chains, and I guess those chains were rattled. Numbers. I'm going to put out 2 numbers to start. 1 and 26,000. This is 1. It's a penny. My grandmother was born in 1892 in Thurso, Scotland. She was the daughter of a landowner. In those days, being a landowner was a big deal. When she was about 20, she fell in love with a hired hand. He was a hostler, which means he looks after the horses, and therefore a plebeian in the minds of my great-grandfather. When she announced to him that she had been invited to marry him and she was deeply in love, he said that if you do that, I will disown you and never speak to you again. She waited until she turned 21, put this penny sewn into the hem of her coat, and came to Canada following the love of her life to Woodstock, married him and had 8 children, and I'm the product of that escape from a domineering man. She said that if I have a penny, I will never be broke. I will never be broke because I still have her penny. She also said, as she raised her 8 children, if you keep a close eye on the pennies, the dollars will look after themselves. The trick is, we've all got to look after the pennies. How do we get here? Our finances have been admitted by the CAO that they're in a mess. And there's some things that we have to do to fix those. The capital budget showed 44 capital items. We recognized that, oops, we missed by a couple. We got 6 updates, and Councillor Wilkinson pointed out last night that after you do the subtraction and take away the 1.6, you're left with a surplus of $423,960. And he invited a response, and that was in the capital Appendix A appendixes, which were updated. And we're looking for the answer to the question of what happened to the $423,960. The answer is in Appendix A, and the logic analysis goes this way. We noticed gone from the original was the unspecified number 26, the infrastructure services, and the aerial fire truck. Added were the workplace assessment, communication strategy, municipal accounting system. That's $669,960 added. Well, we only had 423 to start, so that's 246 over. How do we get rid of the 40? Where do we do? Well, the arboretum was 25,000, so you subtract that, you're left with 221 unaccounted for. Stuart, we were looking for 5 fire trucks in your printer last week, and they were all broken out, a total of 831,000. 636 at that time came from Infrastructure Renewal Reserve Fund, and the 195 from water wastewater. Put a pin in that. So if you subtract the 195, you're left with 26,000. So Just like Trump was looking for 11,780 more votes, we're now looking for just $26,000. On the update, items 35, 6, 7, and 8, the 4 trucks are coming from capital, not from the reserve fund. Number 35 is also a truck, and it's non-levy. Remember, we're looking for $26,000. Number 36 is a truck. It's a single axle dump. And all of the documents submitted to council up until that point, the price point on that truck was $260,000. On the update, it's now $200,000. Why is this identical truck, exactly the same item, now costed at $26,000? Is this truck now $26,000 less to purchase? Does the township have a confirmed purchase order to confirm that that's the price, $200,000? Or have we found the unaccounted for $26,000? You used to have a $26,000 surplus, but if you take the $26,000 off the cost, it disappears. However, it doesn't disappear, because when you go to order that truck this year, I'm sure that the dealer's going to want the $226,000. Where are you going to get it for? It's not audited for. I'm suggesting that an amendment to the budget has to have an increase in the capital budget of $26,000. Number 36, 9 is a truck. It's advertised as being used for utilities, but the description is it's going to have a snow plow, it's going to be used year-round. It's not coming out of an it's a capital item. It will appear on the capital asset management plan. It will be a capital item. It can't be financed through operations. It has to go into capital. There are 6 other items that are assigned to capital: violence assessment, communication strategy, and so on, official plan. They total $1,043,505. They have to come out of operations. They have to come out of capital, sorry, and they have to be assigned to operations. The first one has to go to the CAO's office. The communication strategy also has to go to the CAO department. The request for the update to the bylaw goes to corporate services, the management program, corporate services, the system software, corporate services, the new official plan to development services. Those things have to be reassigned to accurately reflect what is going on. The last thing I was going to talk about was NIFU. We got $95,000 that is assigned in the capital budget plan, the one that the CAO thought we shouldn't, probably didn't need to see. It was out of date, but it was there. $595 for the the stormwater management facility. The mayor's picture's in the paper. It's going ahead. The cost is there, and it's budgeted $95,000 for this year, $500 for next year. There's no $95,000 in the budget this year. You got to pay the bills. You've got to explain where's that $95. I'm suggesting it should go in. I got a lot of the rest stuff, but 7 minutes doesn't allow a citizen to get all the facts out there, so that's the way democracy works.
Thank you very much for coming in, Barry. Were there any follow-up questions for the delegate? Councillor Dunstall?
Thank you, through Mayor. And actually, it was a question to our Director of Finance. Barry had mentioned something, and I had actually had notes here on it, and that was some of the items that were in the capital plan that when I was reading it, and I'm not an expert, but they appeared to me to be operational costs, and they were the workplace violence, the things that he mentioned, corporate communication. So my question was to the Director of Finance. I understand that you were not part of preparing this budget, but those particular items appear to me to be more operational. When we talk about the 9% levy, or certainly when I spoke to the 9% levy to our constituents last year, I stressed that it was going to be used for infrastructure, and these are not infrastructure. So my question to you is, should they be in operations, an operational expense?
Thank you, Councillor Dunstall, for the question. Just quickly before we get to the answer on that, I want to clarify that there were no other questions for the actual delegate, just because I don't want them to have to stand here the whole time instead of grab a seat. Okay, not seeing any direct questions for yourself, Barry. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. Councillor Dunstall, to answer your question, I'm actually going to go to Director Okrafka, as he was the staff lead involved in the budget and acting in that role. So I will turn it over to him.
Thank you, Mayor Salonen. I think for the most part, a number of these, this mic is very loud. The official plan, for example, the software acquisition for the ERP, a lot of those items have previously come to council in staff reports, identified the funding source, and were approved by council as coming from the capital budget. So there may be some smaller new ones that are one-time studies, but typically, I would say in my experience at the township, studies that are one-time in nature or sporadic, say every 5 years or 10 years for an official plan, those studies typically do come out of the capital. The ERP comes out of the capital, and so that's how I would describe to you why those show up in the capital budget, but a number of them have been previously approved. I'll use the ERP, which came in June of 2025 to this council, proposing where it was going to be budgeted from, and that's why it's included in there, because council's previously already approved that to come from the capital budget.
Yep, follow-up, Councillor Dunstall.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. And I appreciate that, and we've spoken today, but I would still like clarification from the Director of Finance. My understanding of capital, and I just want to make sure I understand, is that it has to be something tangible, something that depreciates, something you can kick, hold, or touch, and that doesn't apply to these. So I just want to make sure that my understanding of the capital asset is either correct or perhaps it's not. So I'd like some clarification from you.
All right, Director Gurwal.
Thank you, through your Mayor. From an accounting perspective, the definition of a capital asset would in general be anything that has a useful life over 1 year, so it doesn't necessarily have to be a tangible capital asset. So something like the ERP software, because it would be used over several years, it would qualify as a capital asset and wouldn't be a day-to-day item which would get consumed within a year, and so it wouldn't by definition fall as an operational item.
Okay. On to other questions or amendments, councillors. Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you. Through the chair, I appreciate our delegate bringing this forward, but it should be noted the previous fleet and equipment replacement program did have a different total than what was republished. So let's pick on item 36 in the refresh plan, which is 306-15, a single axle dump. It is now being adjusted down to $200,000 from what was initially budgeted for $226,000. So obvious difference. Why has this changed?
Director Okrafka.
Through you, Mayor Salomon, to Councillor Wilkinson. The change was due to a mathematical error that was noted when we went through the sheets to ensure that the sheets were there for each project. You'll notice a single axle number 36 was shown at 226 originally, now it's at 200. That was the original amount that should have been, so there was a typo on the sheet. You'll notice the tandem axle right below it is at 220. So logically, a single axle is going to be cheaper than the tandem axle. So the 200 was the correct amount. So that 26,000 was an error that we noted when we redid the sheets, and so that was corrected. But that's the rationale. Single axle, probably 20,000 cheaper than a tandem axle.
Follow-up, Councillor Wilkinson, or a new question?
Yes, thank you. Through the chair, well, it could go to the same individual. I mean, we're on somewhat of the same topic. So just looking at funding I guess my concern is knowing what the water and wastewater reserve funds are for. I mean, are we stretching the definition here a little bit of an obligatory reserve to fund the purchase of a truck? I mean, concerning to say the least, and I realize it therefore makes it non-levy, but I mean, are we then potentially putting at risk our water and wastewater reserves, which obviously users have really come to rely upon, because the definition as indicated in this sheet is that it'll be affixed with a plow for light uses during the winter, right? Which not related to water and wastewater. So I'm just curious why we've come to this conclusion that we're going to fund it from the water and wastewater levy, or reserve, excuse me.
Director Vanderwall.
Through the mayor, that vehicle is primarily going to be used by our water wastewater operations. Through the winter times, they generally are moving snow from around hydrants and other uses. The addition of the blade is not considered significant, so that's why it's at a water wastewater.
Additional questions or amendments, councillors? Councillor Cressman.
Through you, Mayor, to council, this is just a trial balloon, I guess, is trying to determine if there's any appetite with my fellow councillors to determine if we find savings in the budget, that we use those savings to reduce the amount of debt that we have to take out as compared to reduce the actual tax increase. So I'm looking at it as, instead of taking out the 4.84, if we find some money in saving X, then the 4.84 new debt is removed, but is reduced by X. So I think that's where my thinking was, because eventually the debt has to be repaid with interest, and if we find savings, then I think that's where I would lean. But I wanted to, before I put a motion to that effect, I'm just trying to do a straw poll.
I will let Councillor Wilkinson respond, but before that, I would just say perhaps we deal with it on a case-by-case basis as to what's brought up. The reason I say that is if it's an operational savings that somebody proposes, that's not financed through debt. It's really only our capital projects that are financed through debt, so I don't disagree with you on looking for opportunities to lower our debt load. I just think probably it's more appropriate to do case-by-case versus a blanket statement, not knowing necessarily what everyone's going to propose.
Just in response, I was guided in that direction. I say that, but I see your point and I can concede that point.
Okay. Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you. Through the chair, on that point, I mean, I think it actually would achieve a couple of things, because in theory, reducing the debt load should have a direct effect on what the servicing cost would be.
Correct.
So in essence, that would be a direct reflection on the operating. So I did have a question, and I realize we're maybe forking a little bit here, but in this budget, can it just be pointed out, so what is our current annual servicing that we're paying out of the operating, and what is the increase this year by taking on that amount? I don't mean to put Director Graywell on the spot, but I am.
Thank you, through your mayor. We're currently paying about $685,000 as proposed for 2026 for principal payments, and then another $600,000 in interest payments. So that's what brought us to our current estimated annual debt service cost of about 6.11%. With the $4.8 million instrument, assuming 10-year term, that would increase that percentage by about 2.9%, bringing it to the 9.03%.
Through the chair, as a follow-up, appreciate that, but I guess could we have the debt repayment or the debt servicing cost be expressed as a number or as a value in terms of dollars? Just because I think ultimately it'd be nice to know what's coming out of that operating budget or that tax levy ultimately to service the debt. And if we need a minute to come back to it, that's okay too. It's more just a question.
Through you, Mayor Salomon, to Councillor Wilkinson. The number would be approximately $117,546.
Very approximate number. Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you. Through the chair. So just to be clear, annually out of the tax levy, we're committing $117,000 or $117,546 to repaying debt. Okay. Okay. Sorry,
and that's with the additional.
That's just for the additional. And sorry, the number previously that we were already paying as servicing cost was 600 flat, just roughly?
601,716.
Okay. And that includes the interest? Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to go to Councillor Dunstall first and then to Councillor Cressman.
Thank you, through your mayor. I was reviewing the $200,000 that we had allotted for the floor repair, I believe it's in State Downtown. I did have a conversation with Director Catania today, and I understand that there may be a safety issue if we don't get it fixed. But my issue is that there are millions of dollars forecasted to bring some of these community centers up to a level where they need to be. And so what I would like to do is I would like to ask, and I totally appreciate that every ward councillor has a responsibility to their constituents. However, I also know that it's our responsibility to make sure that Wilmot stays in a sustainable position. And so I would ask that Director Catania, if we could go to our constituents and ask them of the, I believe it's the 5 community centers that we have, 3 of them are in one ward. That seems excessive to me, and I understand that as ward councillors we do not want to make those decisions, but I do think that the rest of Wilmot should have an opportunity to comment on those. So I'm asking through a motion, if we can, if there's an appetite for that, using Councillor Cressman's words, to have our township go out to the constituents and ask them, because I do believe that we are in a position now financially that anything we could do, and these are hard decisions, and I get that, but they're decisions that they voted for us to make. So my question would be to our councillors, if this is something that we could discuss and put a motion on the floor, if that's what required, or perhaps it's a direction, I'm not sure, to have Director Catania open that up.
So, Councillor, if I understand correctly, you would be looking for that engagement to happen prior to any further investment in our community centers?
So I understand that the 200,000 is in the budget and that it's needed. My question is, or my motion would be to make sure that before we invest any more money, that we actually get our constituents to weigh in on whether they believe that that's where our money should be going. It's their money, we're spending it, I think they should have a voice.
Okay. So I just want to make sure that I'm understanding order of process correctly then. So you're saying instead of actually using that 200,000 that's currently in the budget, you're asking for staff to go out and do engagement and then at that point decide?
Well, actually, it wasn't. I had spoken with Director Catania, and it appeared to me that that $200,000 was needed because of safety issues. And
yes.
You clarify that for me at this point. And if that's the case, I'm certainly not going to have any of our constituents be hurt or open up the township to some kind of liability. What I do want to make sure, though, is before we spend one more penny on any of the other community centers, that we have our constituents weigh in.
Okay.
I hope that's clear. If not, let me know.
No, that does make sense. With that being the direction, instead of direction, I think just to make it super clear, having you bring forward your motion, which I believe you worked on language with. So
yes, I did.
If you want to. Yes.
Okay. So the council acknowledged the findings of the completed community center review, which identified that the township's community centers require significant capital investment amounting to millions of dollars over time, and that several facilities currently either barely cover operating costs or operate at a loss, excluding any future capital improvements. And that council direct staff to engage the community on the long-term feasibility, affordability, and appropriate number of community centers for Wilmot Township as a whole, including options that may involve consolidation or reduction in the number of facilities. And that the results of this community engagement be reported back to council for consideration before further major capital investments are committed.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Is there a seconder for that motion? Seconded by Councillor Martin. So I would open it up for questions and comments. We'll go to Councillor Wilkinson first.
Thank you. Through the chair. Councillor Dunstall, I do appreciate where you're coming from with this motion in terms of wanting to get more community feedback on the investment in our community centers. I would have to be I'm in favor of going through the exercise, but I'm opposed to pulling out the investment in the St. Agatha Community Center because, to be frank, and the community within Ward 2 would be devastated with the loss of this facility. This is a community hub for community meetings, for pickleball, for a variety of rentals, and ultimately the $200,000 is in there because the previous installation of the floor ultimately was a failure, and we were unable to recoup any of the funds, but it truly, in my opinion, does present a safety issue. I've seen it firsthand, but my fear is that by prolonging this process, the floor itself could become more expensive to replace, but also the potential for lost revenue. I can't speak with any degree of certainty what exactly our break even on this facility is right now. However, without a doubt, I can speak to there are a number of upcoming projects and potential rentals that could be very beneficial to the community in general in terms of tourism as well as generating revenue through this facility. But also, we are losing revenue for pickleball to other facilities that have popped up in my ward. There's a church, there's other community centers that are privately funded through a condo corporation, but our facility, my concern is that not investing in protecting what we have, this facility will fall into further disrepair and we will be unable to recoup the revenue and potentially lose the customers that we currently rely on to keep it going. So I'm in favor of the exercise, but maybe making an amendment that we still keep the $200,000 investment in the flooring for the St. Agatha Community Center in particular in the budget. So I would propose an amendment to the amendment.
Just give me 1 second to confirm with the clerk on the best way to deal with that. Yes, that's just what's being, go ahead, Councillor.
My intention, and perhaps I wasn't clear, it was never my intention to remove the $200,000 that we already have. The point of the motion was to not incur any additional. And actually, Councillor Wilkinson, one of your constituents, had a great idea because pickleball has taken off so much. They thought perhaps at one point we could invest in St. Agatha and make it a pickleball hub. For Kitchener, which is so close by, so I totally understand that, but the $200,000 is not in my motion.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, okay. I appreciate that point of clarity, and maybe my fault for misunderstanding. I was under the impression that we were looking to remove that. If that stands, then I would be supportive of going through the exercise to really seek more community feedback on where we're investing in community centers.
Okay, I had also misunderstood that. I thought it was asking for the removal of that amount too. So technically then your motion isn't actually amending the budget before us.
Absolutely, Mayor, it is not.
Okay, I'll let it stand because it's already on the floor, moved and seconded, and that was my fault for not seeking clarity. And I will let it stand as germane, but just generally going forward, can the amendments actually be towards what we were talking about, which is the budget? But we will continue this discussion. Like I said, it's already been moved and seconded at this point in time. So Councillor Martin has a question or comment.
Through you, Mayor Salonen, and just to clarify, in seconding that motion, I had also understood that we were not removing the $200,000. So I think that's important. The reason why I think this motion is germane is I actually I wasn't thinking of St. Agatha, but I think that there would be two smaller community centers, Mannheim and Hayesville, that could be looked at. I think it could help our budget in the long run, but I think the constituents have a right to weigh in on the necessity of all of our community centers. So I think discussing a process where we could revisit this topic of community centers in order to help our budget moving forward.
Okay, Councillor Cressman.
Yes, since it's my ward with 3 and I seem to be the one that's hoarding all this, I think certainly I've talked to Director Catania about this in the last several days and saying we have to engage the people who will be impacted. I think the other question that I would say is that what about the park that is in Mannheim? Does it remain, and does the community center get torn down? Or do we just let it go to the point that it's no longer viable? So I guess there is several things that, I see that as more the question in Mannheim as compared to Hayesville. I don't see a park associated with it, etc. But I think the engagement of the local community, getting their understanding. I keep hearing in my ear that it was the residents of New Dundee that raised the funds to build the community center there. And I think if I had an asset, or when I have assets, I look at what's it going to take to repair the R&M, the repair and maintenance over the next period of time. It's certainly the operating, and I think that is part parcel of the item that drives the decisions around assets that we have, community centers included. And I remember looking at the numbers stuck in my mind over the next 10 years. There was a $10 million figure on the community center, and I believe in Mannheim, and I'd sure like to look at those numbers in detail to figure out and I might be totally wrong, you might correct me on that, so I see fingers going to the button, so correct me, I have been wrong before, as you all know.
Director Catania.
Through you, Mayor Sound, to Council. Just to clarify, when staff brought this report forward in September of 2025, just a high-level piece here. So we did the study for the Mannheim Community Center, New Dundee Community Center, the St. Agatha Community Center, Hayesville Community Center, and as well to 121 Huron, the Seniors Woodworking Center, and the New Hamburg Community Center. And with those 7 facilities, we have, I'd say, an exposure just from at that time of the report, from a 10-year capital perspective, all 7 would be $2 million. So that's the total for all 7. And then we have it also broken down per facility with operating costs, including revenues. But the capital for all 7 is just about $2 million. And I can answer any other questions when it comes to specific facilities in that 10-year plan.
Thank you. Councillor Dunstall, so I want to be really, really clear that I'm not misinterpreting again. Your motion right now has no actual financial impact on the current 2026 budget as it is before us right now, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so with that, I think on a whole, the conversation is important. I would maybe suggest, though, could we move this to our end of February council meeting to be discussed? I would look for a deferral both for sake of, at the moment, it is really budget amendments we're supposed to be speaking to, but also I would be curious for staff to bring back information on how the work that they're doing with KPMG on our long-term financial planning could potentially work into this, because as it speaks to long-term budgeting plans and goals, I think there could be overlap. I don't know definitively, so I would want staff to be able to weigh in appropriately and not just on the fly tonight.
I don't have an issue with that whatsoever.
Okay, so just procedurally, since I'm in the chair, if somebody's willing then, and if that's you, Councillor Dunstall or Councillor Cressman, I see with his hand up, to move that deferral.
I would move a deferral motion. And I would defer it to the council meeting that staff sees appropriate to bring forward, or I have to have a specific date. Do I have to, what if 23rd is too quick for them to get?
You could do it to the March, I mean, you can choose the time and date as to what meeting you'd like.
I'll do it to the beginning of March and see what that is.
March 2nd.
So that would be the March 2nd meeting. Is there a seconder for that deferral? Seconded by Councillor Martin. It's only time and place then that we can discuss. Any comments or questions on that? Councillor Cressman.
Through you, Mayor, to Director Catania, is that appropriate in your time, in your mind, to get materials back in front of council and have comments from the wider community? I realize the engagement will come later, but I'm just looking at, do you require additional time?
Through you, Mayor Salonen, to Councillor Cressman, I think generally speaking from an engagement perspective, we would need a wider period of time, obviously, to engage all the local settlements that would be affected for those community halls and community centers. What I plan to do is I will be away with notice for February 23rd, so March 2nd will be appropriate. I look to come back to March 2nd with pretty much similar information that I already had from the September meeting, and I can present on that, and whatever council decides to direct staff, we can go with that.
So again, keeping in mind it wouldn't actually be this motion being executed by that time, it would be this motion coming back with additional details of if it can be incorporated into another workload that's currently happening. Okay, so that's okay time-wise? All right, I'm seeing February 3rd is appropriate for that then, or sorry, March 3rd, 2nd. I'm just making up dates that don't exist anymore. March 2nd for this to come back for further discussion of council and have some additional context from staff. All those in favor? That carries unanimously. I did have Councillor Cressman back on my list for budget-related items right now.
Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Dunstall, given that we're going to do an evaluation of the barrel roof at the old New Hamburg Arena, which again speaks to what your original motion, I think that likely has to stand and remain in the budget because of the safety concern that presents. I just can't see us pulling that out, and then I think let's find out what how serious, if any, there's concern about that barrel roof, and if it is a safety concern or not. So, do you have any qualms on that remaining in?
Okay. For those listening, then I'm seeing the head shaking of no, it's not. Other questions, comments, or amendments? Councillor Sadhu?
Okay, so this is from the capital budget request number 27 for Chief Leeson. I see we have extinguisher prop for $21,000. I'm seeing that we're spending about $3,700 a year. Is that year over year, or is that just a rough figure, or approximately?
Through the chair, that's an approximate year over year, but it seems to be increasing a bit too. And we are getting year over year increased demand to do this training, and we're not well equipped without this prop to provide the appropriate training to the community.
So, but even as, like, if we don't have the prop, by outsourcing it, they're still getting the same level of training. It's just costing us about $25 a person.
Through the chair, I would consider this a barrier to the community. They do not want to pay that kind of money. So there are places not doing the training. And this is specific to the township. if we were to train township staff, this is what would cost the township specifically, not the community at large. I'm not speaking to the community at large. And we are not doing the training in the township either.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you. Through the chair. I suppose the question I have, and I'm going to sort of set context and then maybe ask the question, but fire extinguisher training, I don't know how it would traditionally be conducted, but I assume it's not always using a training prop. I mean, I imagine there's group settings where you would observe someone using it, maybe have one expulsion from the unit. But I assume to a certain extent that fire extinguishers are made easy to use because you want them to be easy to use, right? I think the acronym's PASS, right? Point, aim, and spray, or sweep, I think it is. Or pull, aim, and sweep, right? That's PASS. So, okay, squeeze and sweep, yeah. So they want them to be easy to use. I guess I'm looking at this and I'm sort of the same thought as at $21,000 for a prop, and we're assuming that we're going to be able to recoup $3,700 or $3,800 a year over 5.5 years to pay for this. I mean, I'm just confused with what you're basing that $3,800 on, because I think I was reading that it would be through community rental or outsourcing, but you're suggesting that that's the cost that the township is currently incurring to do the individual training. I'm just confused with it. I just see it as a potential. It's a nice to have, but maybe not a necessity.
Through the chair, to answer your question, Councillor Wilkinson, the $3,750 times $25, or sorry, 150 employees times $25 is $3,750. That's the approximate cost if we were to train 150 employees in the township. This is my 4th year asking for this particular piece of equipment. This is no longer nice to have, this is a need to have. It is a legislative requirement of every employer that has a fire safety plan that they are to train their employees if fire extinguishers are mentioned in their fire safety plan. We are ill-equipped to provide that level of training to the community. We do not have the appropriate equipment. So to your question about fire extinguisher training, each employee should take the extinguisher and have a go at actually expelling it, because there is pressure behind it. It does do something. And people need to understand what that feels like. They need to know what distance to be from the fire. You don't want to walk up to a grease fire, point the nozzle into the fire, and fire everything all over the kitchen, for example. Not a great example, but an example. This particular device should be, this particular piece of equipment will eliminate the need to have dry chem extinguishers being expelled into the environment. We don't have to light a Class A fire for them to light. We can use it indoors or outdoors. We can use it any time of the year. If somebody has an allergy, we won't impact them in that respect either, and everyone gets the same level of training at the end of the day. I'm, from a fire chief's perspective to the community, we have a fantastic fire prevention and public education program, and this is a really suitable application to enhance that to the community. $21,000 is not a lot of money over 5 years if you break it down to the community that we can provide to each member of the community. This is taxpayers that will be using this piece of equipment at a very low cost to them. So, and we won't, I mean, we're not going to charge them $25 per person. We'll charge a small nominal fee to cover any maintenance costs for the unit to keep it operational at the end of the day.
Any other questions on that item or others or amendments? Councillor Cressman.
Through you, Mayor, to Chief Leeson, just an FYI, I know at our church we had a bunch of fire extinguishers that had become outdated, and so our local chief, who was a member of our congregation, brought our protection plan participants, and they had a Class A fire that he started, and they put it out with the extinguishers. So learn to do by doing is the old 4-H motto, and So it was part and parcel of taking advantage of the hands-on experience, and I think nothing like hands-on experience so I guess from your staff's point of view, they don't have to do this annually, but there's a period that they have to do it. Is that, just so I'm clear, or is it more aimed at it's public facing as primarily, or both?
Through the chair, it's aimed at our municipal staff, not the fire department, aimed at municipal staff and the public at large, because we have a number of local businesses that request the training as well.
At first, I thought you were thinking on your church for starting a fire. Wasn't certain where that anecdote was going. Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, through the chair. So back to Chief Leeson, what would your anticipated revenue be by going out to the community? Because if there's demand for this, I'm just curious what you would see as the return.
Through the chair, there will not be a profit return on this. I am not, unless council directs me to do so, it is not my plan to take this out to the community to make a profit. It's there to teach them fire safety methods. And a fire extinguisher is their first line of defense, whether they be at work or at home, assuming they have one at home. And again, I can't stress, it is legislated if they have a fire safety plan and it's mentioned in their fire safety plan, they are required to be trained. The Occupational Health and Safety Act makes it very clear you shall be trained by your employer to use any safety devices in your workplace. And that's hence the premise that we're using. We will collect a nominal fee to make sure that there is no additional cost to the township tax base to maintain the machine, or the equipment, I should say.
Councillor Dunstall.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Having heard Chief Leeson and knowing that some of our constituents are asking, as well as township staff, and having seen a fire myself in my lifetime, and having seen it grow extremely quickly, I would be in support of this. Thank you.
Any other things to note, Councillor Wilkinson?
Through the chair, I know we've had a conversation on it, we've asked questions, but I would just move that we amend to remove this item from the capital budget.
Okay, so that amendment's been moved by Councillor Wilkinson. Is there a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor Sadhu. Any comments on this in particular? Councillor Martin?
Through you, Mayor Salonen, just to register that I would vote against this. I think this is an important feature.
Thank you. Councillor Cressman, were you going to ask a question or comment?
Yes, through you, Mayor, I would agree. I think it's a service to our community, and I think anything we can do to prevent fires and keep the community informed and our employees and staff informed is money well spent.
And I would just add to that, I also think it's important, and I think as part of our community education component that legislatively we're required to do, this can be a useful additional tool. I certainly appreciate looking for savings. This one in particular, though, I don't think I can support at this time. Any other comments or questions on this? Seeing none, all those in favor, all those opposed, and that's defeated. On to any additional comments, amendments, questions? Councillor Cressman?
Yes, through you, Mayor, to Director Vanderwall, I think the challenge we have with some of the large ticket items, and especially the rolling stock, is the justification sheets regarding repairs, age, etc. And so if you wouldn't mind, I'd like you to try to provide additional detail. I now have the sheet, which I didn't have last time, so I would wouldn't mind you going through there, and if we are going to find some significant savings, it's some of those items that if we can defer a year adds up to the significant numbers rather than looking at the smaller numbers.
Just Director Vanderwall?
Through the mayor, sorry, I was looking at some of my notes. In terms of, you're talking about the vehicles, the biggest one that we discussed a lot would be the pickup, which is stated as replacing one that is actually going to allow our students and other staff to continue working. We're looking at expanding or maintaining everything operationally. I don't have all the numbers right now. We can get them back to you, but I know there's significant costs on especially the larger vehicles, and there's a 2-year wait or an order time on them. The pickup truck, again, it is replacing a vehicle that will then subsequently replace an even older vehicle that, from what I understand, is not even able to be safetied anymore. So we are looking at improving our fleet management and reporting back, but at this time, these are to keep us operational.
And just a reminder on the fleet management, that is something that is in the work plan this year, that staff are focusing on a bigger strategic fleet work plan. Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you.
Through the chair, I think just as a general comment, it would be helpful to obviously have the fleet management plan or a further forecasted 10-year capital plan to really see where the investment for these trucks will be, because I suppose the question is even deferring a truck this year is what trucks do we look at next year, or what is coming down the pipeline. I suppose I would ask a different question to Director Vanderwall, but if there was one of these trucks that you could live without this year, which one would it be?
Through the mayor, admittedly, there is the option at looking at leasing for some of the smaller ones. The larger vehicles are workhorses, so I would have a hard time saying anything. The pickup truck, if we did do it, it would make things more difficult, and we would have to find a way operationally to make that work, or hope that the truck that we are using doesn't stop working, which would put us in a bind. Admittedly, we have looked at how much over the next 10 years, and we've got something and we're working on it. If we defer, it's the same as all other assets that we are delaying. So if I remember correctly, and I don't have my notes completely in front of me, this is a rolling number approximately that, based on the amount of vehicles we've got, we're going to be looking for annually. So I know that's not the answer you really want to hear, but it is the state of our current fleet and what we're looking at and why we're looking at fleet management.
And I will also add, what Director Vanderwall was kindly not saying is that all of staff who had fleet requests were asked to already remove what items they can live without. So for additional context there. Councillor Cressman.
So circling back to this question about pickups, which would be tending, which would drive us towards the question is, have you ever considered pickups coming off of lease, relatively low mileage? Pickup tends to be where I look for my rolling stock, just as a way of letting somebody else pay the big depreciation, and so that's just my bias. But has that ever been a consideration, or because you bump them for other uses, then it likely isn't as appropriate?
Through the mayor, admittedly, I'd have to look at our purchasing bylaw and the ability to do that based on what's available. If there is a good vehicle that meets our requirements, I don't see why we'd have an objection to that. I just don't know whether or not with our procurement policies and how we go about things, whether or not we generally have the ability to find one that is coming off lease. But again, no objection to finding savings. It's not generally the mileage that is the problem with our vehicles, it's everyday use.
Could I suggest we may have a counselor that we could have as a bird dog on this one, but whether that's a conflict of interest or not, I don't know.
I think we'll take the comment noted, but I don't want to be getting into that territory, and I think it's more so the procurement bylaw, which can be a larger policy discussion that council can have should we want to look at updating that bylaw or changing it. Councillor Sadhu?
I had the question about leasing. Are we, or through our procurement, are we able to lease vehicles, or is it just purchasing outright?
Director, no, okay. I would maybe suggest we take a quick 5 minutes just so that staff can ensure that they're reviewing that properly and not have to answer off the top of their heads. And I think it's a nice time for people to get up and stretch because it's been a few hours at this rate. So I just need a mover and a seconder to have a 5-minute recess. Moved by Councillor Sadhu, seconded by Councillor Cressman. All those in favor? That carries unanimously. We'll be back at roughly, let's call it 7:10. to reconvene at 7:17, moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Sadoo. All those in favour? That carries unanimously. I will turn it over to Director Okrafka for a comment on the ability to lease.
Through you, Mayor Solomon, leasing vehicles is certainly an option within our procurement bylaw, as is purchasing used. It is something that can be looked at as part of an overall fleet management review that we want to do, and as part of our asset management update. So certainly those options are all on the table looking forward, and in the next few months as we develop that 10-year capital, the list of vehicles, the options. Again, we have a lot of pickup trucks. One thing that has been discussed at the staff level is also looking at the maintenance of those vehicles and a consolidated, possible consolidated tender for vehicle maintenance as well to reduce overall costs across the corporation.
Thank you. Councillor Sadoo on that.
Just to quick speak to that. So admittedly, I do work in the industry and I've seen the pros and cons of leasing and buying cash. Typically, when it comes to cash flow, I always recommend leasing, just because if you're not going to be driving too many kilometers or you're going to stay within that, leasing is beneficial because you're always going to be under warranty. You can buy maintenance plans with it. So essentially, you don't tie up a lot of capital in a depreciating asset. I often advise customers that if it's a depreciating asset, you want to lease it. If it's an appreciating asset, you want to finance it or buy it. So I am in favor of looking into possibly used or even leasing options, where I think it'll help our cash flow issues. Going down that road where we would have the option of continuously moving our fleet through leasing and staggering it, so we kind of know what we won't have any surprises as far as maintenance goes, as far as something breaks down or yada, yada, yada. It'll be covered under warranty. So I do see merit in looking into our leasing options, and I'm looking forward to seeing what comes out of that.
And I think staff are planning on incorporating that in their fleet management strategy as we go forward. Councillor Cressman.
Yes, through you, Mayor, to Director Vanderwall. This is going back to I&I, infiltration and inflow. When I see that we're spending $1 million annually, approximately, on treating water that comes into our sewage systems, I would see prioritizing high I&I areas and having the equipment to monitor our lateral infrastructures is critical. So I guess that's saying basically, I assume that's what you've done in this list of capital projects, as I understand it and read through it. I guess the question is it doable that all these projects can be completed in this year? Because in essence, we'll be borrowing money against a list of capital projects, and if some of them get deferred to next year because of whatever reason, have we bitten off, maybe that's the wrong terminology, have we been aggressive in the number of projects that we've said we can complete, or do you see it as completely achievable?
Through the Mayor, I do not believe we are overly aggressive in the amount of work we are trying to undertake. We are prioritizing in terms of either risk for water or the I&I program, and you will see a lot of annual programs in there for dealing with this or making sure that we get better information. So we are very cognizant of our expenditures on I&I as well as the risk associated to the water main. So that is where we are putting significant focus, and we are very confident that we can deliver everything that we have put on this list.
Okay. Councillor Martin.
Through you, Mayor Salonen, I had somebody at break mention if we could all speak into the mic, it would help them to hear better. So maybe something to keep in mind.
Thank you. And sorry, I forgot. I said I was going to raise that and forgot to. Councillor Cressman.
Yes, this is again a separate comment about long-term, the 10-year capital plan, and this is a conversation I have had with Director Catania. It seems the press, through you, Mayor, it seems the press has caught on to the idea that $18.2 million fire hall is going to be built and at some point in the future in Wilmot. And I guess the question I had for Director Catania, I think it's important to get on the record, is has a standalone fire hall on Neville Street been investigated, and was that ruled out preliminarily because it was actually higher cost than the proposed schematics that we looked at and that are in the long-term capital plans?
Through you, Mayor Sallin, to Councillor Cressman. We, with this report, which was tabled last week at Committee of the Whole, which I believe was coming back on February the 23rd, excuse me, to answer the question, when we go through the schematic design process, staff would vet out several different options before we would actually ask the consultant to proceed with a Class D cost estimate. We don't want to get into duplicating work, obviously for the scope of work, which was in the RFP to do one cost estimate. We vetted out the most efficient way of using the site. And the reason for what was laid out in that previous report of having the proposed a new addition or fire station joining onto the existing Parks Neville building there was more for the efficiencies. It was efficiencies for site circulation, and as well it came in from a price tag, even though there's that cost estimate in the Class D that shows at about $18 million. If we looked at both of those facilities being separate on the same site, we would be looking at an additional $1.5 million.
Looking for additional amendments, questions or comments? Councillor Stu.
Yeah, this one's to Director Catania for capital budget request 12 for the batting cages. Admittedly, I haven't really seen them ever being used, but that's quite possibly because they're in pretty bad shape. In your experience, are these used often, or is it community asking about these cages? For $70,000 on something, I don't know how much it'll be used. I'm just kind of curious about that.
Through you, Mayor Sallin, to Councillor Sadhu, these cages are actually used quite a bit with our softball association. It's actually more of a training piece, so it helps supplement some of the ball time that they have for practices. We're able to have some of their players use the batting cages for training when they're looking at different pitch speeds, that type of thing. We feel that, and this capital item actually was tabled in 2025 and deferred to this year. We've put it forward again, knowing that in a couple of those locations, these cages are actually showing the meshing around them is actually at a point where they're not usable anymore. They become a safety hazard, and they also invite increased vandalism. So we're trying to rectify this situation and make sure we're maintaining an asset for those two parks.
And I'll just add, 2 years ago, it came forward to us in the community grants because the actual softball league wanted to see if they could help with repairing them, and council decided after staff recommendation that it's our own personal asset, so it will be our responsibility to fix. So just in terms of there is actual general use from a user group in the community beyond what our director shared. Questions, comments, amendments? Councillor Martin?
Through you, Mayor Sallin, I was just going to say I see them being used during the ball season. So, and I remember years ago when my son was playing, they were used. To me, they seem like an active, something that's used actively.
Councillor Wilkinson?
Thank you. Through the chair, I don't know, I get the sense that we may have exhausted our examination of the capital budget. I don't know how much deeper we could really get into that one, but I want to turn my attention to the operating budget if we could. I'll start with the mayor and council budget. I'm just reviewing this, and I'm wondering if it could be explained to me how we would somehow spend $43,000 for development conferences and events. Looking at past history, I mean, 2025 was 17,008, 2024 was 19. I mean, that's a pretty significant increase. So I'm looking for some insight into that, and I'm wondering if that number is appropriate.
Yeah, absolutely. So that number is mainly derived from actually accurately budgeting if council were to access what they have the opportunity to. So that is in terms of conferences, and I recognize not everybody on council attends conferences right now, but we do currently allow, and granted we're lacking an actual policy on this, it's more so a general understanding. We allow for councillors to attend both AMO and Roma, as well as to do additional professional development. So in terms of the increase is actually budgeting for what those costs would be as if every single councillor took up that opportunity. Not to say that we couldn't make a policy otherwise. Some of our neighboring jurisdictions, like North Dumfries, for example, you can, I believe it's only one conference a year that you can go to as a councillor, and it's on like an application that you come to council saying, I'd like to attend for XYZ reasons. However, in the absence of having a policy, we were simply budgeting to allow that should every councillor take up the opportunity, we actually would have then the money to pay for that. So that is the main portion there. Some of it is also to address the cost of actually running outreach, which currently has mainly been town halls. And then the other thing is an addition, which I believe is about $2,000 for a fundraising concept that would actually be to bring in money. For the castle, it's still being fully developed, but that was just upfront money to invest in the opportunity actually coming to fruition, again, still being developed. So yes, that costing is to actually represent should council take up the opportunity before them. Totally open to, if we want to look at a policy discussion, changing what council is actually able to access in terms of conferences, because we currently don't have a policy on that. Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, I can appreciate the logic behind budgeting for if everyone were to access this, these funds to attend conferences, but I think in reality we've seen the history and the numbers that would suggest that we don't. And I mean, I can see where it can be valuable. At the same time, I think it's a pretty big expense. I'm just looking at what we've actually spent over the years, and I could almost see us cutting that number in half to $21,005. And it's, my concern is that if we budget it and we collect it from the taxpayer, in essence, it's either going to be socked away as surplus and then reserves, which is not a bad thing. However, at the same time, I'm just looking and trying to be conscious of the fact that taxpayers are having a hard time right now and everything gets more and more expensive. I'm wondering if that's an item where, you know, we could potentially carve a little bit out and really just look at maybe a policy is due, but, you know, really sort of looking at our numbers and our historical, the most we've ever spent was $19,000 in 2024. So we've never really hit that number. So my concern is over budgeting for it, and then therefore just accumulating these funds for the sake of having them. So I see a few instances of this where I'm wondering if maybe, you know, we can come up with 100, 130,000 and potentially save the taxpayer a percentage point. But that's one example. If I can ask a follow-up to the, so my next question would be, the next line item is grants to community groups. This has been essentially completely defunded. I'm curious, where exactly did that go, or how are we approaching that moving forward?
That went to community services. Yeah, it's more so just a better budgeting practice for administering the program.
Very good.
So did you want to make an amendment? I would perhaps suggest going closer to 25,000. The reason I say that is twofold. One, calendar year, Roma does come out of, Roma for 2027 would come out of the 2026 budget, and there will be a new council at that point in time. And two, that currently I don't pay for conference fees because I sit on both the AMO and Roma board, so my fees are not accounted despite having myself attend. So I'm saying more so look at 25,000 would probably be realistic for this year's actual fees for conferences to allow half of council to attend. And then I would maybe suggest that we look at bringing forward a policy for council to actually consider. That would just be my suggestion if you're looking for an amendment, but of course we're in your hands as to what you would like to propose.
Through the chair, before I maybe go and suggest specific amendments, I will float the idea, and I'm curious maybe where my other councillors are sitting on this, but, you know, I'm personally looking to cut back this operating number by a percentage, maybe 1.5%, and that if we make it in a blanket way, it could potentially leave staff to adjust their budgets as needed, or we could, I suppose, dissect piece by piece. But I'm curious about where the rest of the group's feeling, if there's an appetite for it at all. But I certainly, that is my objective in terms of going through the operating budget here. I don't know if there's comments or support for that.
So what's before us is amendments to the budget, not actually sending staff back to the table. So I would just say go through and propose what you would like to see actual changes on. And if that totals up to your 1 or 1.5%. So Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, then I would propose that we cut the development conferences and events portion of the Office of Mayor and Council budget down to 25,000 and ask for a revision to the policy or development of a policy related to that expense.
Okay. So it will be a development of a policy be brought back, I would say, to committee. Okay. So that's been moved by Councillor Wilkinson. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Dunstall. Comments or questions on this? Councillor Cressman?
Yes, I'm one that has taken advantage of this opportunity to go to conferences. I realize everybody can't because of their commitments elsewhere. I find it extremely beneficial on the breakout sessions that you can go to and find it an opportunity of learning about municipal best practices and ideas. And I think as well the idea of the delegations that we have, I think we need critical mass. If we go to MPPs to present things that are unique to our municipalities. So I think you have to have a certain amount of certain amount of attendance there by councillors and certainly senior staff. So I think it's important, and to the extent I don't put my meals or my travel in, and if there was a situation where other councillors wanted to go, I'd certainly be willing to pay my own way, just because I think it's a valuable experience. And that being said, I agree with the 25,000 that is being proposed.
Just to comment to that, actually, Councillor Cressman, and I mean, the 25,000 is fine. I simply proposed it actually as a alternative in terms of budgeting fully for what we currently allow. But on your point about paying personally, I did want to note, although I think that that's great that that's something you find is great value and would be open to do to allow for others to go, I think long-term sustainability, we really need to, as a council, consider anyone in these roles, and not everybody necessarily has the luxury of being able to pay their own way. So I think from a sustainability and getting candidates that feel that they can do the role justice and also want to have the same opportunities, I don't want to go setting a precedent saying that you have to pay your own way. And I know that that's not what you were saying, but I didn't want it to be misinterpreted either. I'm just being handed, just one moment here. So the clerk is just suggesting that we have the amendment to the budget as one vote, and then staff bring back a policy as a second vote. Okay. And the suggestion actually is that the policy instead be brought forward as a notice of motion for our next meeting. Councillor Wilkinson, is that okay for you? So she's saying, like Councillor Dunstall's motion, because it doesn't actually directly impact the budget? So that's okay with you that that comes back? Yes.
So through the chair, just to clarify, the direction to bring forward the report or the ask for a policy will be moved to the next committee meeting. However, what we're asking for to amend the number down still said. Very good. Yeah.
Correct. Yes. Okay. So we do have the amendment then for making that number $25,000. Any other comments or questions on it before we vote? Seeing none, all those in favor, and that carries unanimously. Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you. Through the chair, just seeking clarification on the regular salaries for the Office of Mayor and Council. I will note that council was paid out of the honorarium, and that has not changed or been modified. And I realize I just quickly did the math. I mean, this is representative of removing the $65,000 that was initially taken off. However, I'm still noting a rather significant increase in the salary. I mean, what are we looking at here? It's an additional $55,000 annually for this particular function. But if I'm mistaken, can I just get clarity on that? Is that also paying a portion of another salary, or is this for one individual?
Can you just give us one moment here to see who's the appropriate staff to ask?
And thank you. And through the chair, to maybe add to that, I mean, we're also seeing the benefits portion increase significantly as well. So I know that there's a fringe cost to having a salary, but this is a $57,000 increase.
Through you, Mayor Salon, my understanding is that the amount that was going to be reduced has not yet been pulled out of these numbers.
Councillor Wilkinson.
From the previous meeting.
Through the chair, so the previous numbers then that were representative were honorarium salaries and benefits all grouped together. Is that accurate? And then we reduced that number by $65,000?
I don't know the answer to that.
Just,
The salaries and benefits is where the $65,000 would be included, is my understanding. That was removed, but on the sheets that I have, it hasn't been taken out yet because the mayor retains that power of veto. So we've told you what that reduction would equate to, but the sheets that I'm looking at still include that number because the mayor ultimately, at the end of the day, after all these amendments are proposed, has the ability to veto that. So the sheets still show the number. Does that make sense?
Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, that makes sense. And clarifies, because that would be a $65,000 oversight. Okay, very good. I will probably have a question again in a moment, but if someone else wants to jump in, I would cede my time.
Sure. Any other questions or amendments to any part of the budget? Councillor Dunstall.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. I was just wondering, do we have a tally? I know that we haven't reduced a lot, but I was just wondering, do we have a tally, and percentage-wise? I certainly appreciate Councillor Wilkinson wanting to reduce by 1%, And I'm just wondering where we stand right now with the 65 and the reduction to 25, and I think there was one other item.
So from the changes that were made last week with the 65 and then the COLA for council, that brought us to 9.22%. And then I'll turn it over to Director O'Crafton.
Through you, Mayor. The reduction of reducing the training conferences by 18,000 down to 25,000 further reduces the 9.22 to 9.1%.
Okay. Was that a follow-up question, Councillor Dunstall, or were you saying you were good?
That was a thank you.
Okay, very good. Any other amendments, questions, comments? Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you. Through the mayor, looking at the budget for community services, I noted that equipment repairs and maintenance, we were looking at a potential, I believe, $50,000 budget increase. Our actual last year was 42, the year prior was 30, and now we're potentially budgeting for 83. So again, it's over 100, no, it's 150% increase in the budget. So I'm just wondering what's driving that. And again, is there any possibility of us reducing that here? Because it seems like a rather large increase for that particular item.
Through you, Mayor Sallin, to Councillor Wilkinson, that increase is a result of the anticipated repairs for 2026 for the Dryatron before we get to the next stage for going to construction if that capital item is approved. So in 2025, we had a small capital item to do some, really to get things moving along with the Dryatron, to keep it up and running, and that some of the capital dollars were used. We did have to spend some money on operating as well. But for this, we're right-sizing our equipment repair to anticipate approximately an extra $50,000 that will be taking place to actually just keep it running along and running for 2026.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, I'm just wondering, can you repeat that number one more time, what the expected increase directly related to the Dryatron is?
Through you, Mayor Sallin, to Councillor Wilkinson, that increase directly is $50,000. That's the rationale for increasing that line item.
Councillor Sadhu, were you going for a question or comment or amendment?
Yeah, I just saw this pop up here. For the Office of the CAO, I see contracted services. Historically, we've been anywhere between 20 to 30,000. And this year we have budgeted 85,000. Is that essentially the contracted services that factor in the service reviews? And essentially, my question is how, with that 85,000 budgeted for this year, which is well above what our averages are, what does that entail?
Through the mayor to Councillor Sadhu, the intent is this is for HR legal services, for a job evaluation consultant, and for recruiting services, so it's predominantly in HR. And you will note that for contracted services, our 3-year average budget was 48,000. Our 3-year average actual was 122,000. So that's really, we're still budgeting for quite a bit less than our previous actuals, but our previous budgets were nowhere near realistic.
Councillor Cressman.
Yes, yes. As a follow-up through you, Mayor, to CAO Wilmot, is that the 60,000 that was identified in the service delivery report recommendations, excuse me, for immediate implementation on HR, an HR consultant? And
I'm sorry, I can't remember exactly what you're talking about from the service delivery review. I apologize.
Give me a minute. Somebody else can ask a question, and I'll grab my paper.
Councillor Wilkins.
Thank you. Through the chair, I will go back to community services. Looking at, there's a budget line item here for ground maintenance that is increasing significantly as well. I'm looking for some justification for that particular number because, again, looking at it, I would suggest that, you know, we could be right-sizing here, but again, I'm wondering if maybe that number's too large. But could you comment on that level of service increase, please?
Through you, Mayor Sallin and Councillor Wilkinson, this would really stem from a few different line items, whether it's the WRC, Normal Park, and as well in New Hamburg, Mike Scout Wetlands. So we have, we're right-sizing our budget when we look at ground maintenance. We're looking at grass cutting, sports field maintenance, playground repairs, ground restoration, tree maintenance. So there's a lot that fall into those buckets, and we're ensuring that we're right-sizing those. And specifically as well, that would also capture grounds maintenance that would happen at 30 Neville Street with the Parks facility, where there are going to be some site repairs that actually have to take place, lighting repairs, and different maintenance that's outside of the facility itself.
Councillor Cressman?
Yes, through you, Mayor, to CAO Wilmer. It's Initiative 7, adopt a strategic approach to people management. In the service delivery report, foster a stable, sustainable, and high-performing organization through strategic people management. And then it talks about timelines. While this initiative remains critical, deferring this initiative to Horizon 2 can be justified by recent staffing changes in HR and the number of competing priorities of the township.
So through the mayor, then, to your previous question, the budget change that proposes $85,000 does not include that. So what's in the 85 is HR legal services, job evaluation consultant, and recruiting services.
Thank you.
Any other questions or amendments? Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you. Through the chair, I don't know that we're going to be able to get this number down anymore. I mean, a lot of these are right-sized. Where I'm leaning towards at this point is knowing that we have a 10-year capital plan coming. We have an asset management plan update coming. We have a long-term financial plan being worked on. Knowing that we have the ability to review in-year amendments or in-year changes to this budget, plus we have a capable individual now working in our finance department who I suspect will be able to bring us regular variance reporting and actuals for the quarter. I want to table a motion that this budget is reviewed at each filing of those financial reports, but additionally when we receive or when a completed item is done, such as a 10-year capital plan or a long-term financial plan, so that we can at that time consider potential changes or amendments to the budget in year. So I want to put that out there and document that so that we are receiving these options, because I'm again, it's very difficult to make additional changes without seeing where we're going and what some of these other documents will inform. So I think that will be beneficial to us and allow us the opportunity to reopen this again moving forward as the year goes on.
So just for clarity then, what are you, I get that you want to have it documented, but what are you logistically looking forward for when those reports come? Are you looking for the budget document to come back? Or I just want to know so that it's very clear.
Through the chair, it's been described, and at least the literature I've been able to read regarding a strong mayor's budget is that we can make in-year amendments and changes. So I think it would be responsible of us to that when we receive, in my perception, the information that we are currently lacking to make better decisions to potentially amend this, is that when those materials become available, we then take the time to properly revisit this document and make amendments. But I would ideally see it that when a 10-year capital plan is completed and prepared, that we would logically apply it to this document. I mean, I see it as more living and breathing now at this point, given that, again, we're lacking some of these informative details and documents.
Okay, I don't disagree with that. I guess I'm just saying, because legislation does already allow for it, are you looking for an actual prompt to council when those come forward? Okay, so you're looking for an actual prompt from staff then, when this comes forward. Oh, Councillor Dunstall.
Sarah, yes, through you, Mayor. I just wanted to make sure I as well understood what Councillor Wilkinson was saying, was that if this is approved tonight, and then as long as we can make changes, there's no issue with approving it this evening. Is that what he's saying?
I'll let Councillor Wilkinson speak for himself.
Through the chair, I'm not saying that. I mean, I personally, I think in general, I'm not a fan of the process that has unfolded through this budget season, nor do I intend to really endorse what's here. But I mean, I don't necessarily think the council even has a choice in the matter, to be honest. This essentially, this evening, as amended, becomes budget, whether or not I think we vote for it or not. So what I'm suggesting is that I think we've identified through this that there's a lot of information and outstanding documents to better inform this document, and that I want to ensure that there is a policy set forth from today that when those documents are completed and become available, in addition to quarterly updates on where we stand in terms of budgeted versus actual, that we are taking the time to properly review this, because I think there would be potential opportunity to make informed decisions to adjust things down, and that could reflect future budgets favorably. So I think it's just the due diligence of wanting to make sure that that's documented, and I don't think I'm incorrect in describing the process.
Councillor Cressman and then Councillor Martin.
Yes, through you, Mayor, to you, Mayor. I guess the question I have is, in reality, this, by not tabling any future amendments, the tax rate becomes set. Future information is future information, and it would inform the next year's budget, correct? You can't go backwards in time and tax the installments for 3 and 4 will go out, reflect taxed installments for period 3 and period 4 will go out reflecting what is the tax rate as of your final decision on the amendments that have been tabled. We can't go back and change that, or they aren't fluid over the year, but they can then provide a bedrock for future budgets that will be developed by the mayor at the time after post-election for 2027, correct? Is that what I'm understanding we're talking about here?
Well, yes. I mean, that is also my understanding of the budget process, is that a budget is making estimates on what we're going to spend in a year. As has been very upfront about this entire process, is due to the fact that we've been lacking expertise in our financial department for quite an extensive period of time. We did not put in the 10-year capital because we're bringing in KPMG to help us consult on doing that. The reason it wasn't done simultaneously is because that requires a lot of actual working hours from our staff as well. And so the priority was put on getting a budget so that we could start on, in particular, capital projects, because you get a better rate the sooner in the year that you can book them. However, yes, what you are saying is correct in that once the tax rate is set, that is the amount that's collected. It's at the later tax amounts where it's the increase is reflected. I guess my thing would just be in-year budget changes it's not that they don't change the budget, but we usually don't go back out and change the tax rate. It would be very similar to how this council decided in year to spend $100,000 on bringing in Strategy Corps. We didn't then alter the tax rate to adjust that, but we made an in-year budget decision as a council to bring in their expertise, and then that would reflect off of if we had a surplus, it would have been taken out from there or taken from a reserve, I think is what ended up happening in that particular scenario. So I guess, not that I'm against in principle what Councillor Wilkinson's talking about, my thing is just logistically, it wouldn't actually be modifying the budget document. It would be changing from, varying from that path, would be my thing. That would just be my personal perspective on it, Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, I just, for the sake of having this conversation, I suppose that's one way of looking at it, but I think at the same time, I don't know. I think there's a door open to us that we haven't necessarily explored where potentially there is changes. I mean, if we get midway through the year and we're not spending in certain areas, or there are items that are identified that this was incorrect, I mean, I wouldn't be opposed of looking at the process of potentially helping out the taxpayer and looking at the levy. I understand that it's set, but I don't necessarily always agree it's set in stone. I think theoretically, there's always options available to us, but that's a thought process and a procedural process that would obviously unfold very differently than what we'll even get into this evening, and what that would look like. No one's 100% sure. However, the idea is that I think it's prudent of us to review when the documentation becomes available, and that's ultimately what I'm getting at.
So have you now moved that? Would you like to now move that motion, because we haven't had a formal seconder? Okay, so that's been moved by Councillor Wilkinson, that as additional financial documents come forward, that this council reviews the budget. Councillor Cressman, is it a comment or is it to second?
I think Councillor Sadu said.
I haven't actually asked for a seconder, but Councillor Sadu, are you seconding it? Okay, Councillor Cressman.
Through you, Mayor, regarding this, I think maybe I'm the glass half empty or 3/4 empty. I'm more concerned that we'll find through our asset assessment and our capital forecast that we're further behind the 8 ball than we anticipated. And maybe I'll be pleasantly surprised, and I hope I am, but I think at the end of the day, good decisions require good information, and we've been working, you've been working, we've been working with one or two hands tied behind our back based on the information available. No fault of staff, but I think we've taken steps in information management, in staffing, in outsourcing that will provide us with the solid numbers that we need to ultimately put the corporation on a solid footing going forward. So that being said, I guess I'll be ready to debate at some point in time if we have the opportunity of changing the tax rate in year. I don't think I've ever heard of that, but maybe that's just me. As such, I'll leave it there.
Councillor Martin?
Through you, Mayor Salonen, speaking to Councillor Wilkinson from a few minutes ago, my understanding is that 2/3 of council can turn down the budget, so my understanding is that we do have a choice. Yeah, it's in the paperwork here, it's in the legislation that the province has put out, that if the mayor tables the budget, but there's the veto, and then there's the 15-day deadline, like there is an opportunity that if 2/3 vote against it, that's my understanding.
I think the clerk is just going to add clarity, because that's on the actual vetoes, I believe, that you're talking about, but I'll turn it over to our clerk.
Through the mayor to council, just to clarify, today is the last day of the 30-day amendment period. Then the mayor has 10 days to veto any amendments made by council, and then following which there would be a 15-day period for council to override any vetoes that the mayor makes. There's no opportunity to veto the budget in its entirety, only on individual amendments.
I guess I understand it differently. I suppose if we had to turn it into a debate or legal advice, we could do that, but my understanding is that 2/3 of council can vote against the mayor's budget.
Okay. It's not a debate. I can appreciate where you're coming from, Councillor. But to be clear in the legislation and what was set out in the timelines is tonight is the end of the 30 days from the tabling. So the budget will stand as amended. Then as the mayor, should I choose to veto anything, I could in a 10-day period, and then council could override those vetoes. To this point in time, to the amendments that have been changed, I have no intent on vetoing. Also noting that in our makeup of council, as it's 6 members, of 2/3 vote is the same as a regular vote of majority, as it's 4 members it requires. So a veto is kind of a moot point in our council makeup. Councillor Cressman?
So through you, Mayor, to you, Mayor, we don't have to look for white smoke from your office to determine whether it's been vetoed or passed.
No, this is not the Sistine Chapel, but Councillor Sadhu.
So I feel like we're talking in circles here, and it's a lot about future in budget and hypotheticals, but I did second Councillor Wilkinson's motion that essentially if no other amendments are made, the budget is adopted. So that's my understanding. So yeah, I would second Councillor Wilkinson's motion, and that's all I have to say about that.
I think just to be clear, that's not actually what the motion on the table is.
Through the chair, just to be very clear, nowhere in my motion does it suggest that the budget should be adopted. It's more so that we review in year as additional documentation and financial exercises are completed.
Yes. And so on that, Councillor, because again, it's not one that's an actual amendment to the budget, can that be brought forward at the March 3rd meeting? Is that okay with you?
Through the chair, I would, yeah, that makes logical sense. Go for it.
Okay. All right, so that will be brought forward then as a policy discussion point. Any other amendments to the actual budget? Councillor Martin.
Through you, Mayor Sallin, I had spoken about this a week ago. There is an opportunity to join in with Wellesley Township, and I'm not sure if CAO Wilmot is prepared to speak at this time about it, but my understanding that with the cost of $17,000, we could contribute to the sustainability coordinator. In my mind, that's not a huge cost. I think it's a significant opportunity. And so that would be a motion that I would like to put forward, is that that we would, I guess we still have to negotiate with Wellesley, so there would be some things that might have to be settled, but my motion would be that we would have a talk with Wellesley and and if possible, access the grant and move on this sustainability coordinator.
Through the mayor to Councillor Martin, yes, that is a strong possibility. I don't think there's much negotiation to happen. It's an offer that Wellesley has approached us with. That yeah, half of an FTE, a position housed at Sustainable Waterloo Region, and with a 25% grant available to be shared between the two municipalities, our total cost for this year would be $17,000.
Councillor Cressman, are you seconding that? Or was it a question on that of clarity? Okay, it's now been seconded and you can speak to it.
Is that 25,000 an ongoing cost, or is it a one-time cost, or and maybe the same with the grant? Is the grant reducing it to 25,000 or 17,000, and next year it's going to be 50,000? I guess that would be more my question.
Through the mayor to Councillor Cressman, the grant, if approved, would be a 2-year grant. So we would have that certainty for 27 as well as 26. The cost would increase to $25,000 because it's all of 27, where it's only 3/4 of 26. So another way to put it is our annual cost would be $25,000. What we need to budget this year is 17, because we're planning to fill the position for 3/4 of a year.
I would have a follow-up question to that. Would this be a permanent full-time position then, or is it a contract for 2 years while the grant exists?
It's the latter, 2-year contract.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments on this amendment? Do you know what budget line it will be going to?
No, I don't. Wait.
It's on.
Howie.
It's on right now. Okay, so it's $17,000. Councillor, are you intending for it to go in operating then? Yes, okay, intended to go in operating. I would just look to Director Okrafka.
So it would go into whoever's budget it is that the person is going to report to through, so I'm not sure. Historically, it would have been financial services dealt with sustainability, and it pretty much gives you back up to 9.22%. By adding that into the budget, you took 18,000 out, you're adding 17,000 back in, you're basically at 9.22.
So hearing that, and I would suggest community services would be the place that it would report, because this is mostly about energy management for our facilities and our fleet and leadership for the community, but community services is the most logical fit.
Okay, so we have a motion before us for this particular budget to add 17,000 into community services operating for a 2-year contract for sustainability officer that is joint with the Township of Wellesley and pending a grant application, and noting that there would then be the additional amount to make it up to 25,000 going into next year's budget. Councillor Cressman?
Yes, even though I seconded it, I hesitate to vote in favor because I would like to know more specifics on the duties and responsibilities of this individual. Can anybody give me more information?
Through the mayor, not tonight we can't, but what I would suggest is you could put it in the budget and we will report back with more details before we actually hire the position.
And then perhaps that's an opportunity to remove and make budget amendments if it passes. Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, I was about to say that's probably a prime example of an in-year budget amendment. I would be more inclined to look at it when we have more information in front of us, personally.
Any other questions or comments on the amendment? Councillor Dunstall?
Thank you, through Mayor. Am I correct that the wording here was the pending grant, so we're not sure the grant is a done deal yet?
Through the mayor to Councillor Dunstall, there's a high degree of confidence on this grant, and I would suggest that if we don't get the grant, we wouldn't hire the position.
Any other questions or comments on the amendment? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor and opposed? And that is defeated. Any other amendments that people would like to put on the budget? Seeing none, and no other questions? Seeing none. I just need to follow up here. Okay, so the amendments as they are made brings us to 9.1% as the tax levy. And at this point in time, the debt amount is staying at the original proposed amount of just over 4 million. Yes, sorry, almost 5, 4.8. Thank you. And in terms of this evening, does wrap up the 30 days for amendments. As I noted earlier, I do not plan on vetoing anything that has been amended by council. So this will essentially be the budget as stands, obviously pending if council later in term chooses to make in-year budget changes. Now, with that, we will proceed to our next item on the agenda, which is our bylaws. So we do have bylaws 07, which is to appoint a fire chief, and this is Andrew Michelko. And just noting that thank you very much to Chief Leeson for his many years dedicated to our township. I know that you're still on for a few more weeks with us before you're heading over. Unfortunate for us, but fortunate for you, the City of Waterloo has recruited the fire chief. And so in the interim, that bylaw is appointing Andrew, who currently works for the township in our fire department and will be quite capable on taking on that role while we go out to recruitment. And then with that, that causes a bit of a cascade to then appoint Nicole Schnarr as our Community Emergency Management Coordinator, who also Nicole currently is on our fire team and will do a great job of that as well. So I did just want to make note because those bylaws are a little bit different than we've had in the past. And again, big thank you to Chief Leeson. Yes, Chief Leeson.
I just wanted to clarify, because you mentioned the word fire chief to Waterloo. I am not going to be the fire chief of Waterloo. I wanted to make that very clear. They have a fire chief.
Yes, sorry, I was not speaking to your new role that you're going into. But thank you for the clarity there. All right, with that, I'd be looking for a mover and a seconder of our bylaws. Moved by Councillor Cressman, seconded by Councillor Wilkinson. All those in favor? That carries unanimously. We have no notices of motion, but noting that we have multiple items coming back for council/committee to further discuss and presumably pass. I do have a few announcements. Monday, February 16th is Family Day in Wilmot, and there's a few different activities going on, including a free skate at the Wilmot Rec Center from 9:30 to 10:20, and again from 11 a.m. until 11:50 a.m. The New Hamburg Firefighter Association is hosting a breakfast at the New Hamburg Legion from 8 a.m. until noon on Family Day, as well as the Baden Community Association is hosting a Family Fun Day celebration from 11 until 3 upstairs at the Wilmot Recreation Complex, and admission there is free. Also, Thursday, February 19th is the Petersburg Water System Open House from 6 until 8 p.m. at the St. Agatha Community Center. And Saturday, February 21st is Wilmot Heritage Day, and it is the theme of firefighting throughout the years, and that is from 10 a.m. until 2 p.m. at the New Dundee Community Center. Admission is free and lunch is available for purchase. Do any other councillors have announcements? Councillor Dunstall.
Thank you, through Mayor. I wanted to put a save the date for March 8th is International Women's Day. And the Board of Trade is going to be organizing our first event for that. It's on a Sunday, and we're in the middle of planning it, so hold that date open. It's going to be an exciting event for women in Wilmot. Thank you.
Feel so March about
Fantastic, Councillor. Thank you for sharing about that. Any other announcements, councillors? Okay, seeing none. I'd look for a mover and a seconder of the confirmatory bylaw. Moved by Councillor Stu, seconded by Councillor Cressman. All those in favor? That carries. And adjournment. Moved by Councillor Cressman, seconded by Councillor Sadhu. All those in favor? And I was going to say, are you opposing what you just moved, Councillor? All right, and we're adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.